Welcome to another ThemeMountain video tutorial. This is part 1 of project grids, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create categories, how to set up a grid, how to create a project, and how to add a filter menu to the grid. So the first thing you want to do when creating a grid is determine whether you want a filter menu or not. Now if you do, you need to create a bunch of categories which will populate the menu. So I'm here under folio categories, and as you can see I've already created a bunch of different categories to which I'm going to associate my projects. But if you haven't imported the demo content, creating categories from scratch is really simple. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you how easy this is. So I've named my category test category, and I'm going to go ahead and add it to the list here. Now the category list here will be accessible directly from the project page so that you can associate the project with any number of categories you want. So now that I've set up the list, I'm going to go ahead and create a project. So as you can see, I've already created a bunch of different projects. I have a number of projects here that are associated with one or more categories. So these are the categories that would appear in the filter menu. Above here you can see I have a range of project images that are labeled as uncategorized. Now we use this category if we want to exclude it from a certain grid, or for example if we don't want it to appear in the project loop. This is also useful if you're just creating an image grid like a lightbox grid within a project, but I'll get into detail about that later on in the other tutorials for the grids. So I just wanted to show you this, but what I'm going to do is create a new project, a sample project. So I'm going to give it a title here, and I'm going to go down to categories. I'm going to associate it with a few categories. I'm going to select the test category that we just created. Now I'm not going to go into detail how to style the project here, and I'm not going to show you how to add a featured image. That's a different tutorial. However, I will mention that you can set a different featured image from the thumbnail in the grid. So this means you could have a different orientation of the thumbnail grid and then have the full width featured image for the project. So I'm going to go ahead and select my thumbnail for the grid. So I'm selecting a landscape one here. Now if we scroll down here, we have a few options relating to the appearance of this project in the grid. One, whether we should link it to the project itself, whether we should launch it in a lightbox and link it to a totally different page, or whether we should not link it at all. We can also then change the appearance of the project in the grid, whether we should show it with text, whether we should just have a solid background in text, or whether we should exclude it altogether in the grid. And the last thing here is the orientation or format of the thumbnail. Now this is particularly useful if you're creating a masonry grid and you want different size tiles. So I'm just going to leave it to not specified here, so it will default to a small landscape. But you could choose large landscape, portrait, large portrait, or wide, and that will variate the orientation of the item in the grid. So I'm happy with my project here. I'm just going to go ahead and publish that, and then we're going to go ahead and create the grid. So I've created a test page here, and I've already inserted a section block. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a grid here from scratch. Now when you insert a grid, you're presented with a range of different options here. I'm just going to go through the defaults quickly here, but we'll go through more in detail in the later tutorials for grids. So I'm going to leave the filter menu checked. I'm going to leave project title and description hidden. Now basically what this option does is that if you set it to show, it will show the project title and description below each thumbnail. And then I'm going to go ahead and build the grid itself. So I'm going to select Team Portfolio because we created projects. I'm going to leave the max count at 10, which means that no more than 10 projects will appear in the grid. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the categories that I want to appear in the filter menu. So I'm just going to go ahead and start filling them in here. So once you start typing here, it will suggest the different categories, so you can just select them. and I'm going to go ahead and add the test category that we created. Right, so I'm happy with the categories, and if you scroll down here, you'll also notice that you can add elements to the grid either through tags, taxonomies, or even through post page and custom post types. Now, the individual post and page and custom post types option is useful if you want to just create a grid within a project, let's say. So you can just start listing the grid items here by name instead. In terms of width, I'm going to leave it to fixed width, so we'll assume the width of the content. I'm going to leave the layout mode to masonry. I'm also going to set fixed thumbnail dimensions. And there's a bunch of settings here, so I suggest you play around with them and see what they do, because I'm just going to leave them to the defaults as they are right now. I will mention though thumbnail ratio. If you, for example, want to have a grid with square images or square boxes, you could simply change the thumbnail ratio here and then upload square images to the projects you want to associate with the grid. The column number I'm going to leave to 3, and I'm going to leave the gutter size to large. Now, if we go and have a look at the other tabs here, we see that we can style the menu. We can left, center, right align it, and we can change the link color on the fly. We can also change the rollover option of each of the grid items. So we can set the rollover background color, the caption text, and how we should align the rollover text. We can also change the animation of the grid upon resize, the filter duration, and also the rollover animation type for the thumbnails in the grid. Again, this is something I suggest you play around with and really try out. There's a huge set of presets here for easing and animation types for the rollovers. So try this out and see which ones you prefer. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to go ahead and publish it. And this is what it looks like in the front end. So we've created our filter menu with the categories. So if I click test category, we're only going to show the project we associated with it. And if I click the rest here, we can see that there's a bunch of projects associated with multiple categories. And if we scroll down here, we can see that it's a beautiful masonry grid. We have varying sizes for some tile items, such as this one, which is a large landscape, portrait image, and a wide image. And that's all for this tutorial. Join us in the other post-grid tutorials or project grid tutorials, and we'll have a look at how to create a lightbox grid, how to add text and text boxes to the grid.